First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. By the way, I'm going to kind of do this. Hold up a hand. The number of rights we touch on. Establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Notice that we've really got 6 rights covered in that First Amendment. We touched on this, and I've already mentioned it before. In Blackstone's law, and commentary on the common law, there was 186 what they considered natural rights. Remember, we go all the way back to Samuel Pufendorf, and we mentioned that in the first class. There's a lot of Berlin Marquis, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, all of these others that we came across the board. They came up with these natural rights, and there was 186 of them listed. So when these men got together, primarily George Mason liked these things out, they started putting them together, and there was comments. And you only got to see the letters they wrote outside, but the fact is they recognized we got 186 of these rights, so we got to start lumping these together within each amendment. Now, today when we get a bill comes in and they decide to pass this and that, and the other thing, they're all different kinds of things all packed together. It's not something that we really appreciate because they can tack on pork back behind the back, and we get all this other stuff. It would be much better if it was put out individually. These men recognized that with 186 rights, they were going to have to kind of bolt these together and try to hit the high points, hit the ones that are going to be the foundation. Okay? So that's why they enumerated these this way. Okay? I'm going to jump through here. Freedom of religion. Congress will make no law respecting the establishment of religion. Once again, I'm going to give you a case study. That all men have a natural and unalienable right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own consciences and understanding, and that no man ought or of right can be compelled, there's many things there, to attend any religious worship. By the way, that actually took place in Massachusetts. You had to attend certain churches, and you, by the way, had to show up at that church 2 or 3 times a week, or you could be jailed. Okay? So there was times that this was there. So the fact that they really wanted to go ahead and give this in staunch freedom. Okay? To erect or support any place of worship. I'll stop there just for a second. Even supporting, because there were some cities that would tax you for that church. Okay? Kind of give you an idea. Even with this, there was a problem that happened just prior to the Civil War. Anybody ever heard of Henry David Thoreau? His writings on civil disobedience was because he was jailed because he wouldn't pay a church tax. A church he didn't attend, so therefore he didn't consent to that tax. That's another document I highly recommend everybody read it once a year. Or maintain any ministry contrary to or against his own free will. So if you don't appreciate the Catholic Church, and you're a Protestant, you don't have to support that Catholic Church. Okay? Nor can any man who acknowledges the being of a God be justly deprived or abridged of any right as a citizen on account of his religious sentiments. Okay? So that's on there. You can't have your right to friends because you believe a different way than the rest of your community. On account of his religious sentiments or a peculiar mode of religious worship. Now this one can open up a can of worms, and it has in the past. People that practice voodoo, Santeria, things along those lines might be objectionable, okay, to other members of the community. The United States had to back off in certain areas where it would be objectionable, and we have to accept that, wait a minute, in order to have our freedom, we've got to have other people have their freedom too. And we're going to get to this and other rights too. Because there's some things that we have as law right now that infringe on somebody's rights because it's become politically expedient. Okay? So therefore, these restrictions are unalienable. They're unable to be infringed upon by the government because they're fundamental. Okay? Whether our personal beliefs are different, we have to recognize that we have to protect other people's rights just as much so we can have our own.
Was there a period of time when the cult type groups like voodoo or whatever were not considered religion?
Yeah.
And then when they restated them as religion, that's when it became
And they kicked in.
Yeah.
Right. And so there is a form of abuse that can take place, but at the same time, we've got to recognize that sometimes we've got to allow certain things in order to maintain our own rights. And this is a hard point. I've had many a debate over this, especially from my here in a bit. Okay? No authority can or ought to be vested in or assumed by any power whatever that shall in any case interfere with or in any manner control the right of conscience in the free exercise of religious worship. Now, I can tell you some violations in this. There's every single right we're going to talk about, with one possible exception, and even it was violated one time, has been infringed upon by our own government. Okay? One of the things in this kind of area is right conscience, for instance. And this one, I've spoken in front of churches and have them get very upset with this fact. But the fact is that, and I'll make this very brief, a tithe. Most Christians believe in a tithe. A tithe is supposed to be 10%. It should be a sacrifice. Okay? And it has to come from your first fruits. So whether that be the first 10% of this crop, this new batch of sheep or cattle, that you got, the first 10%, or if you work in a regular trade and you get a paycheck, that first 10%, you got your gross paycheck, you get $500, that first 50, that check needs to be put into the tithe. With our current state with withholding, you can't give anybody, you cannot tithe at all. Secondly, in a church, the fact is you don't get that first 10%. Who gets the first 10%? The government does. So that's like conscience. Okay. This is an area where when you dig down into these and you start realizing where we're getting these things, so the First Amendment is violated by the withholding. Okay. I won't go much further into that. One thing more on that before I move up to this one. And that is the 501c3 church. Okay? And here's the thing about the tithe. It has to be a sacrifice. So if I donate 10% to my church, so I can write it off of my income tax, have I made a sacrifice? No. It's a matter of conscience.